What happens when royalty walks into a studio expecting civility and walks out into chaos? When Prince Harry, the man who left the palace to find peace, sits down on The View. He doesn't know he's walking into a trap carefully set by one of television's most unapologetically outspoken voices. This wasn't supposed to be a confrontation. It was meant to be another calm interview about purpose, mental health, and redemption. But when Joy Behar's involved, peace doesn't last long. By the end of the segment, one of the world's most famous men would rise from his seat, remove his microphone, and say words that would echo across every media outlet in the world. And as he walked off stage, the audience would realize they hadn't just witnessed a TV moment. They'd seen a royal reckoning live on air. It was a Wednesday morning in Manhattan, and the View studio buzzed with its usual mix of nerves and caffeine. Assistants hurried between lighting rigs and cue cards. Producers whispered into headsets, and the audience filled the seats, clutching mugs emblazoned with the show's logo. They weren't just there for any guest. They were there for Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex, a man who had become a paradox. Royal and rebel, celebrity and critic, insider turned outsider. Backstage, Harry adjusted his cufflinks. He wasn't in royal regalia. Those days were long gone. But his navy jacket, open white shirt, and calm composure carried that unmistakable aura of controlled presence. He smiled politely at a stagehand, nodded at the producer who was counting down seconds to airtime, and exhaled slowly. He'd been briefed that morning. It's just a conversation, light and friendly. They'll ask about your foundation, your new book, your work with veterans. That was the plan. But plans, as Harry would soon learn, don't mean much when you're sitting across from Joy Behar. The lights rose. The music cue played. Whoopi Goldberg smiled into the camera. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to The View. We have a very special guest joining us today, a man who's been at the center of global headlines, a father, a veteran, a humanitarian. Please welcome Prince Harry. The audience erupted into applause. Harry stepped out with that familiar half-smile, polite, warm, slightly shy. He waved, shook Whoopi's hand, greeted Sonny Holland, Alyssa Farah Griffin, Sarah Haynes, and finally turned toward Joy Behar. She didn't stand up. Her lips formed what looked like a smile, but her eyes told another story, sharp, appraising, almost daring him to slip. Joy, Harry said with a nod, extending his hand. Harry, she replied coolly, shaking it briefly. Welcome back to the real world. The audience chuckled awkwardly. The line was meant as humor, but there was something biting underneath. Harry let it pass, sitting down in the center chair. Whoopi opened the conversation, her tone warm and professional. Harry, it's great to have you here. Let's talk about Sentinel, your new foundation focused on veterans' mental health. Tell us what inspired it. Harry smiled, easing into familiar territory. Well, I've been open about my experiences both in service and afterward. I've seen how invisible wounds affect soldiers long after they've left the battlefield. Sentinel is about building support networks, not just therapy, but community. No one should fight their battles alone. The audience clapped. It was genuine. Even Joy nodded faintly, but it was the kind of nod that carried calculation behind it. Sonny Hostin jumped in. That's powerful, Harry. You've turned pain into purpose, and that's something people respect. Harry smiled appreciatively. Thank you. It's been a journey. Then Joy Behar leaned forward. So, Harry, she began casually, her voice dripping with that trademark mix of humor and challenge. You talk a lot about helping people find peace. But do you ever feel like you've caused quite a bit of chaos yourself? The studio shifted. The laughter from the earlier segment evaporated. Whoopi blinked. Joy, she began, but Joy waved her hand dismissively. I mean, come on. Joy continued. You left the royal family, gave interviews about your trauma, wrote a tell-all memoir, did documentaries about how awful your life was, and now you're telling other people how to heal. Some people might find that a bit ironic. The words hit like a crack of thunder. The audience gasped softly. Harry's smile didn't fade, but his posture changed. He straightened slightly, his jaw tightening in subtle restraint. He took a calm breath before answering. Well, I suppose everyone's healing looks different. Mine just happens to be public. I've never claimed to have all the answers, just my own experience. Joy smirked. Right. But your experience seems to come with Netflix deals and global press tours. A few uncomfortable laughs rippled through the crowd. Sunny looked at her notes. Sarah shifted in her seat. Whoopi gave Joy a warning glance. Harry nodded slowly, his voice still calm, but his tone measured. You know, Joy, I didn't come here to debate my motives. The truth is, I've been through some very difficult years, and I've used my platform to advocate for things I believe in. Veterans, mental health, children's welfare. If that bothers you, I can't apologize for it. The audience applauded again, louder this time. But Joy wasn't done. She leaned back, crossing her arms. No need to apologize, Harry. Just own it. You can't be both the victim and the hero in the same story. It's confusing for people. There it was, the first spark. Harry smiled thinly. Maybe the world's big enough for both. Whoopi, sensing the rising tension, quickly interjected. Okay, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll talk about Harry's charity work in Africa and what's next for the Duke of Sussex. The applause sign flashed. The audience clapped, though half of them were whispering to each other, already sensing something was brewing beneath the surface. As the cameras faded to commercial, Joy leaned back in her chair, flipping her cue cards with a faint smile. Harry exhaled through his nose, steady, collected. But the slight narrowing of his eyes said it all. The Duke wasn't rattled yet, but he'd been challenged, and Joy Behar wasn't finished. When the cameras came back from commercial, the view looked calm on the surface, but underneath there was tension so thick you could almost hear it hum through the studio lights. Whoopi smiled into the lens as if she hadn't just spent the last 90 seconds trying to diffuse a brewing argument. We're back with Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex, talking about life, purpose, and the projects that keep him busy these days. The audience clapped, polite but hesitant. Harry gave a small nod, maintaining that same calm expression. But his posture was straighter now, his eyes sharper, like a soldier quietly assessing the battlefield. Joy Behar leaned back in her chair, pen in hand, pretending to skim her cards. But everyone in the room knew what was coming. She wasn't finished, not by a long shot. Sunny hosted and spoke first, trying to keep things positive. Harry, one thing people admire about you is your openness. You've talked about mental health, therapy, vulnerability. That's inspired a lot of men to do the same. What's the biggest lesson you've learned about healing? Harry smiled softly, grateful for the question, that it's never linear. Some days you're strong, some days you're not. But real healing happens when you stop pretending to be fine and just allow yourself to be human. I think that's something we all need more of. The audience applauded warmly. For a moment, it felt like the show might find its footing again. But Joy Behar didn't believe in letting things stay peaceful. So speaking of being human, she cut in her tone syrupy but sharp. Do you ever regret airing so much of your private life? The book, the interviews, the documentaries? I mean, people have started to wonder if you've turned pain into a brand. The words dropped like stones. Harry turned toward her slowly. I'm sorry. Joy shrugged, smiling like it was harmless curiosity. Look, you've told your story, and that's your right. But at some point, doesn't constantly revisiting your trauma start to feel, I don't know, profitable? A low murmur ran through the audience. Whoopi visibly tensed. Sunny's smile froze. And Sarah Haynes pressed her lips together as if she'd just bitten into a lemon. Harry blinked once, twice. When he finally spoke, his voice was even, almost too even. I think there's a difference between exploiting pain and transforming it into purpose. Joy, I've used my experiences to advocate for others. If that offends you, I can live with that. The audience clapped, tentative but supportive. Joy tilted her head. Oh, I'm not offended. I'm just asking. Do you think maybe your story has overshadowed the causes you claim to care about? Sometimes it seems like it's all about you. Harry inhaled slowly through his nose, his jaw tightening. I talk about my story because it connects to the causes. That's the point. People who've been through trauma need to see that it's possible to rebuild. I'm not trying to center myself. I'm trying to humanize the conversation. Joy smirked, pen tapping against the table. Right. But you understand why people see that as hypocrisy, right? You say you want privacy, but then you do podcasts, books, and TV specials about your private life. Which is it? The crowd reacted audibly this time. Gasps, whispers, an uneasy shuffle of bodies. Harry's patience was thinning, but he still kept his tone composed, almost disarmingly calm. Joy, privacy isn't about silence. It's about control. I choose what to share and when. That's not hypocrisy. That's boundaries. The audience broke into applause. Loud, sustained applause. Joy's expression faltered for a second, but she recovered quickly, laughing like it was all a game. Fair point. I just think some people miss the old-fashioned royals, dignified, quiet, not doing Netflix specials. Harry chuckled softly, but there was no humor in it. And some people miss the old-fashioned journalists, the ones who listened before they judged. That landed like a punch. The audience erupted in cheers and gasps. Even Alyssa Farrah Griffin covered her mouth, trying to hide a grin. Whoopi tried to steer the segment away. Okay, let's not turn this into a debate. But Joy was already speaking over her. Oh, I'm not judging, Harry, I'm just asking questions. You're the one getting defensive. Harry turned to her fully now, his voice still calm, but edged with steel. I've been asked the same questions for years, usually by people who don't want answers, just headlines. But if you think standing up for myself is being defensive, then maybe that says more about how you approach interviews than it does about me. The room went silent. Whoopi glanced toward the control booth. The director's hand hovered over the cut to break button, but the tension was too magnetic. No one dared move. Joy's smile hardened. You've got quite a temper for someone preaching mindfulness. Harry leaned forward slightly, his tone still polite, but the softness was gone. No, Joy. I've got boundaries for someone who's been attacked for years by people who mistake cruelty for journalism. The studio exploded in applause. Even some of the crew clapped instinctively before realizing their microphones might pick it up. Whoopi finally cut in. Okay, we're taking a quick commercial break. We'll be right back. The music swelled, cameras cut away, but the damage was done. Harry sat back, exhaling slowly, his face composed, but his eyes burning. Joy crossed her legs, smiling tightly, flipping through her cards like she'd just won something, when in reality she'd only managed to push a prince one step closer to walking away. When The View came back from its second commercial break, the tension in the studio felt different, heavier, almost electric. The audience had sensed it. The crew had felt it. And Whoopi Goldberg, the veteran moderator who'd seen everything daytime TV could offer, looked like she was silently praying for smooth sailing. But Joy Behar wasn't done steering into the storm. The segment resumed with Whoopi's steady professionalism. We're back with Prince Harry discussing his foundation work, mental health advocacy, and family life here in the U.S. Family life. That phrase hung in the air like a spark near gasoline. Joy smiled faintly. Yes, family, she said, leaning forward. Harry, you've spoken so much about your new life in California. The peace, the freedom, the privacy, but how's all that working out? Harry blinked, slightly caught off guard. I'm not sure what you mean. Joy tilted her head. Well, it's just the tabloids you say traumatized you. They're still running stories. You left the monarchy, but you're still in headlines every week. At a certain point, doesn't that suggest maybe the problem isn't them? Maybe it's you. The audience gasped audibly. Whoopi's eyes widened. Joy, she warned softly. But Joy just kept going, her smile bright and unflinching. Harry took a deep breath, his voice still calm but firmer now. I didn't create the obsession, Joy. I've lived with it. The difference now is that I have a voice and a choice. Oh, come on, Joy interrupted, waving her hand dismissively. You chose to be in the public eye. You do documentaries. You give interviews. You publish books. Then you say you want privacy. It's contradictory. You can't have it both ways. Harry's expression shifted. That famous calm, that royal restraint was still there. But beneath it, a flash of something raw appeared. Not anger exactly, disappointment. I think you misunderstand what privacy is, he said, looking her directly in the eye. It's not about hiding. It's about control. About not letting other people weaponize your life for profit. Joyce smirked. So you left one institution for another. Traded the palace for Netflix. Forgive me if I'm not seeing the moral evolution here. A wave of murmurs rolled through the audience. Sonny Holan shifted uncomfortably. Sarah Haynes was staring down at her cords. Whoopi raised her hand, trying to regain control. Joy, let's keep this respectful, but Joy wasn't listening. Let's be honest, Harry, she pressed on, her tone turning colder. You talk about compassion and mental health, but isn't all of this just one long therapy session for the cameras? It's like watching a royal reality show. The studio air froze. Even the camera operators hesitated, unsure whether to zoom in or pull back. Harry leaned forward slightly. His voice was calm. Dangerously calm. You're mocking therapy now? That's brave Joy. There are veterans watching this show who fought to stay alive because someone encouraged them to speak. You think that's entertainment? The audience clapped hard. A few people stood. Joy's smirk faltered, but then she went for the kill. Oh, please, Harry, don't lecture me on bravery. You've been living in California luxury, giving interviews from your mansion, and blaming your family for your pain. At what point do you take responsibility for your own choices and for the circus that follows you? That word circus seemed to hit something deep. Harry's lips parted slightly, his composure cracking just a fraction. He inhaled, exhaled, steadied himself, then very quietly. You want to talk about responsibility? I've taken responsibility every day of my life for my mistakes, for my choices, for my duty. I served 10 years in the British Army. I buried my mother after watching her die because the same press you're now defending chased her to her death. So yes, I talk about it because silence killed her and I refuse to repeat that mistake. The studio went dead silent. Not a shuffle, not a breath, only the faint hum of the lights above. Whoopi closed her eyes for a moment, visibly shaken. Even Joy froze, her usual confidence evaporating in the gravity of his words. Harry's voice didn't rise. He didn't shout. He just spoke. You think my life is a performance? That what I do is PR? No. Joy, it's survival. It's trying to make meaning out of something that nearly destroyed me. I'm not looking for your approval. I'm asking for basic humanity. The audience erupted, not polite applause. Thunder, cheers, whistles, chants. Joy forced a smile, clearly rattled, and tried to recover. Well, I didn't mean to upset you, Harry cut in, still measured, but now resolute. No, I'm not upset. I'm just tired of having my motives questioned by people who profit off cynicism. You don't have to understand me, Joy, but you don't get to mock what I've lived. Whoopi leaned forward, her tone gentle. Let's take a break, she said, though her voice was trembling slightly. The screen cut to commercial, but no one in the audience moved. The applause hadn't stopped. Off camera, Joy sat frozen in her chair, eyes fixed on her notes, but clearly not reading them. Harry sat back, taking a slow sip of water, his hand steady. He didn't look at her, not once, because in that moment it was clear. This wasn't a debate anymore. This was a reckoning, and by the time the show returned, there would be no going back. When the cameras came back, you could almost feel the heat of the studio lights pressing down. The View had seen its share of confrontations over the years, but nothing quite like this. The atmosphere was taut, alive, with the sense that something irreversible was about to happen. Whoopi Goldberg, ever the professional, took a steady breath and tried to reset the tone. We're back with Prince Harry talking about his work with veterans, mental health, and hopefully keeping things civil. The audience laughed lightly, nervous laughter, the kind that only makes tension worse. Harry gave a faint diplomatic smile. Civility is always the goal, he said calmly. But across the table, Joy Behar wasn't done. Not after that last segment. Not after being humiliated on her own show. She leaned forward slightly, resting her chin on her hand. The picture of casual curiosity, though her eyes told a different story. Harry, can we talk about Meghan for a second? The air changed again. Even the camera operator stiffened. Harry's expression didn't move, but something behind his eyes flickered. Sure, he said cautiously. If we can keep it respectful? Joy smiled. Of course, always respectful. I just think people are curious about how she's doing. You two have been through quite a lot, and some say she's been a bit of a divisive figure even among your own family. A murmur ran through the audience. Harry's jaw tightened. She's my wife, he said evenly. She's strong, she's resilient, and she's doing just fine. Joy nodded slowly. Right, but you have to admit, she's not exactly popular in the UK anymore. There are people who think she pulled you away from your duty, from your family, from everything that defined who you were. Do you ever regret that? There it was. The question that crossed every line. The studio went utterly still. Harry's face changed. The polite guest was gone. In his place was the soldier, the son, the man who'd buried too much under too many cameras. His voice, when it came, was low but unflinching. You're asking if I regret loving my wife? Joy raised her eyebrows. I'm just asking if you regret how it all happened. Harry leaned forward slightly, his tone calm. Deadly calm. Joy, let me explain something to you. I didn't leave my family. I left an institution that valued image over empathy. I left a system that chewed people up for headlines. And I didn't follow my wife. We walked away together because peace is worth more than protocol. The crowd broke into applause. A few people even stood. But Joy, embarrassed now, pushed harder. Come on, Harry. You talk about peace, but you've spent the last few years giving interviews, criticizing the royal family, the press, your own father. At what point do you stop blaming everyone else? That was it. The crack in his composure finally appeared. Not anger, but something colder. He nodded once slowly. You're right, he said quietly. It's easy to say. Stop blaming others when you've never had your entire life turned into a public punching bag. When every trauma you've ever lived through becomes tabloid entertainment. Joy opened her mouth, but he didn't let her speak. His voice grew firmer. I've watched people like you reduce real pain to sound bites. You don't ask questions. You provoke. You don't listen. You wait to pounce. And then you call it journalism. The audience roared. Applause thundered through the studio. Joy flushed crimson. Excuse me, I've been doing this job for 30 years. Harry stood up. The sound of his chair scraping across the floor silenced everything. I'm sure you have, he said. But maybe somewhere along the way you forgot that the people sitting in this chair are human beings, not ammunition. The studio froze. Whoopi looked stunned. Sunny put her pen down. Alyssa's eyes widened. Sarah Haynes covered her mouth. Harry reached up, unclipped his microphone, and held it loosely in one hand. His voice softened again, not angry, not raised, just steady, final. I came here to talk about service, purpose, family, not to defend the existence of my wife, not to justify my happiness. I've dealt with enough cruelty for one lifetime, and I won't sit through more of it for the sake of your ratings. The audience erupted again, clapping, cheering, shouting his name. Go, Harry, someone yelled. You tell her. Joy tried to recover. You're walking away. That's what you do when it gets hard. Harry turned back, his expression composed but icy. No, Joy. That's what I do when it gets toxic. He placed the microphone gently on the table, gave Whoopi a respectful nod, and walked toward the exit with the quiet authority of a man who'd fought bigger battles than this one. The cameras followed him as he disappeared backstage. The audience gave him a standing ovation, the kind that drowned out everything else. Joy sat there frozen, staring down at her chords. For the first time in a long time, she had no words. Whoopi cleared her throat softly. We'll be right back, she said, her voice tight. The broadcast cut to commercial, but everyone in that studio knew the moment was already immortal. By the next morning, the clip would dominate every social feed, every entertainment headline, every morning show recap. Prince Harry walks off the view after heated exchange with Joy Behar. And in every replay, one thing stood out. Not Joy's smirk, not the applause, but the look in Harry's eyes as he left. Calm, steady, and done. He hadn't stormed off. He hadn't snapped. He'd simply drawn a line, the one every decent person wishes they could draw when pushed too far. And as the credits rolled that day, the View audience didn't just see a prince walking away from a talk show. They saw a man reclaiming his dignity, one final, graceful step at a time. If you think this was one of the most intense talk show moments ever caught on camera, let us know in the comments below. Do you think Harry did the right thing by walking out? Or should he have stayed and fought back? Tell us what you would have done. And if you enjoy stories where truth meets tension and dignity wins in the end, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss our next deep dive into television's most unforgettable confrontations. Because sometimes the calmest exit makes the loudest statement.